Beneath the waves, where sunlight fades and silence reigns, lies a secret the world has tried to forget. Over 200 underwater structures have been discovered across the globe. Colossal pyramids, paved roads, sunken cities older than the pyramids of Giza, and strange machines buried under miles of ocean. And here's what they don't want you to know. Some of these sites are over 10,000 years old. But human civilization, according to textbooks, only began 6,000 years ago. So who built them? A forgotten civilization? Survivors of a global cataclysm? Or something older? From a massive pyramid off the coast of Japan, perfectly aligned with the stars, to a sunken city near India that predates the Sphinx by thousands of years, to a disc-shaped anomaly in the Baltic Sea that behaves like no natural formation ever recorded. This isn't science fiction. These are verified sonar scans, carbon-dated ruins, and eyewitness accounts from marine archaeologists who say, this changes everything. Today, we dive into 15 of the most shocking underwater mysteries on Earth. And by the end, you'll question everything you've ever been taught about human history. Because the truth is not on land. It's buried beneath the sea. Before we dive into the mysteries, just a quick note. While the visuals in this video will provide extra context, they aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. Feel free to let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these Part 2 eerie of shocking submerged ancient mysteries.
What if an entire city, bustling with life, was flash frozen in time? Not by ice, but by the sea itself. Just a few meters beneath the waves, off the coast of southern Greece, lies Pavlopetri. It's not a few scattered ruins, it's a complete ghost town on the seabed. We can see its streets, its buildings, its courtyards, and its graves. But one question has haunted archaeologists ever since its discovery. What catastrophic event dragged this ancient metropolis to its watery end? This isn't the mythical Atlantis, this is real. While older submerged settlements exist, Pavlopetri is the oldest planned city ever found beneath the waves, with a complete urban layout. This is the story of that city, and we're about to piece together the clues to uncover what suddenly and violently destroyed it. Our story starts not in the Bronze Age, but in 1967. A marine geoarchaeologist named Nicholas Fleming was exploring the waters of Vatika Bay, and he wasn't looking for a lost city. But as he scanned the seabed, something impossible began to take shape. Just 4 meters down, he saw the unmistakable outlines of man-made structures. These weren't just random walls. They were organized, complex, and stretched out across the seafloor. He had stumbled upon a complete town. The next year, a team from the University of Cambridge arrived to map what Fleming had found. Using simple hand tapes and a grid system, they painstakingly surveyed the site. What they charted was astonishing. At least 15 building complexes, some with up to 12 rooms each, arranged along clear streets. They found courtyards and 2 different kinds of tombs, painting the first picture of a society frozen in time. The initial discovery was groundbreaking, but the technology of the day could only reveal so much. For decades, Pavlopetri held its deepest secrets close. It was a ghost on the seafloor, its full story just out of reach.
Fast forward to the 21st century, the investigation into Pavlopetri was reborn, this time armed with technology the original discoverers could only dream of. In 2009, a major project led by the University of Nottingham brought in the heavy artillery of modern archaeology. They used advanced robotic survey equipment and sophisticated sonar mapping, essentially allowing them to digitally drain the ocean and see the city in unprecedented detail. The results were breathtaking. The new scans revealed the city was far larger than previously thought, now totaling nearly 50,000 square meters. Over 9,000 square meters of new buildings were discovered, including a massive hall that was likely a civic center. Using stereophotogrammetry, the team created a stunningly realistic 3D model of the entire site. For the first time, anyone could fly through the streets of Pavlopetri and see its layout as if the water had vanished. What this digital model shows is a masterclass in ancient urban planning. Pavlopetri wasn't a haphazard collection of huts. It was a sophisticated town with residential areas, public spaces, and what appears to be a complex water management system. It is the single most complete submerged city plan ever found. Because it sank and was never significantly rebuilt upon, it provides a unique snapshot of Bronze Age life, untouched by later civilizations. This unparalleled preservation is what makes Pavlopetri a true time capsule. So who were the people who walked these streets? The thousands of artifacts recovered from the seabed tell the story of a thriving commercial hub. Archaeologists have found an enormous amount of pottery, from simple tableware to massive clay storage jars, known as pithoi, imported from as far as Minoan Crete. This tells us the city was a key player in the vast trade networks of the Aegean. Its strategic location on what was then a peninsula made it a perfect harbor, a gateway for goods flowing between the mainland and the islands. The discovery of loom weights suggests a bustling textile industry, while stone tools and a bronze figurine point to skilled craftspeople living and working here. The earliest signs of life here date back to around 2800 BC, with the city flourishing for nearly 2,000 years. It was a community of sailors, merchants, artisans, and farmers, with a population that may have peaked between 500 and 2,000 people. The city's different burial areas, grand chamber tombs, and simpler cist graves hint at a complex social structure. And then, around 1100 BC, it all came to an end. The bustling streets fell silent, and the city began its final journey into the sea. To solve the mystery of Pavlopetri's destruction, we have to think like detectives, examining the geological and archaeological clues left behind. The answer isn't one simple event, but a cascade of devastation. Clue number 1, the shaking earth. The most widely accepted theory points to a violent and familiar culprit in this part of the world: earthquakes. The region sits on a tectonically active fault line. Geologists believe a series of at least 3 powerful earthquakes struck the area around 1000 BC. But these quakes didn't just topple buildings. They caused something far more destructive: subsidence. The very land the city was built on dropped dramatically. For a coastal city, this is a death sentence. Each earthquake would have lowered the city closer to the sea, allowing catastrophic flooding. Clue number 2, the relentless rise. Compounding the earthquakes was a slower, more insidious threat: rising sea levels. Over the millennia that Pavlopetri was inhabited, the Mediterranean Sea was steadily rising. When the city was first built, it sat a couple of meters above sea level, but by around 1200 BC, that buffer had shrunk significantly, making it dangerously vulnerable. The sophisticated water channels found in the city might have been an attempt to manage this increasing threat, but it was a battle they were destined to lose. The rising water was a constant pressure, and the earthquakes provided the final, fatal push. Clue number 3, the wall of water. Could a tsunami have delivered the final blow? It's a compelling theory. A major offshore earthquake of the kind known to happen in the region could have triggered a massive wave. A tsunami would explain the suddenness of the abandonment and the way the city appears frozen in time, sweeping over the already lowered coastline and burying the buildings in the sand and sediment that paradoxically helped preserve them. However, it's still a hypothesis, as scientists have yet to find the distinct sediment layer that a tsunami would have left behind.
Clue number 4, a fading world. There's one final piece to this puzzle, and it's a human one. Pavlopetri's demise coincides with a mysterious and turbulent period known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Around this time, great civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean suddenly fell into ruin and trade networks disintegrated. It's possible these wider social and political changes had already weakened Pavlopetri. Perhaps its population was already dwindling, leaving a ghost town waiting for the sea to claim it. So what truly destroyed this ancient city? The scientific consensus points not to a single event, but to a perfect storm of destruction. The primary killers were a series of violent earthquakes that caused the land itself to sink dramatically. This sudden subsidence, happening in a world where sea levels were already steadily rising, put the city in an impossible position. It was likely hit by repeated flooding and perhaps even a final devastating tsunami that acted as the finishing blow. This combination of geological violence and long-term environmental change proved unstoppable. What took nearly 2,000 years to build was brought to ruin in a terrifyingly short span of time before being swallowed completely by the Mediterranean. Pavlopetri is more than just an ancient ruin. It is a stark reminder of the fragile relationship between human civilization and the forces of nature. Its story shows how even prosperous societies can be erased by a planet that is constantly in motion. The earthquakes, the rising sea, these are forces we still contend with today. Yet the very catastrophe that destroyed Pavlopetri also preserved it. Sheltered beneath the waves, its streets and buildings have survived for 3,000 years, offering us an unparalleled window into a lost world. It allows us to walk the streets of a Bronze Age city and understand its people, its economy, and its place in the ancient world. Today, efforts are being made to protect this incredible site from new threats like pollution from passing ships and damage from anchors. Greece has even created underwater routes for swimmers and snorkelers to experience the magic of the site firsthand, turning it into a unique eco-archaeological park. Pavlopetri's story is a profound one. It's a tale of innovation, ambition, and a vibrant society. But it's also a humbling lesson, written in stone on the seabed, about how suddenly a world can vanish beneath the waves, leaving behind only a beautiful, silent ghost of what once was.
The Pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, the great cities of ancient Sumer. For most of us, these are the landmarks of our past, the story of civilization we've all been told. The conventional timeline says the first complex settlements, like Eridu, popped up in Mesopotamia around 5400 BCE, with the first true cities like Uruk emerging a bit later, around 4000 to 3500 BCE. That's the history written in our textbooks. But what if that whole timeline is off? What if the real cradle of civilization isn't on dry land at all? What if, 120 feet beneath the waves, a single accidental discovery is threatening to tear up our history books and make us question everything we thought we knew? Because back in 2000, off the coast of India, scientists stumbled onto something that just shouldn't exist. Something so old, and apparently so advanced, it has sparked a bitter debate that's been raging for over 2 decades. It's a discovery that, if it's ever proven true, would mean advanced human societies existed thousands of years earlier than we ever dreamed possible. This is the story of a potential lost city that could completely rewrite the story of humanity. It all started as just another day at the office. In December 2000, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology, or NIOT, was mapping the seabed in the Gulf of Khambhat. They weren't looking for ancient history, they were studying marine pollution. But as their sonar equipment painted a picture of the seafloor, something impossible started to take shape on their screens. Down beneath 120 feet of murky, turbulent water were vast geometric patterns. These were not the random, messy shapes of nature. The sonar seemed to reveal enormous, regularly spaced structures, what looked like massive walls and grid-like layouts that stretched for over 5 miles. It had all the hallmarks of a massive urban complex sitting on the bottom of the ocean.
The discovery was mind-boggling. This wasn't just a few buildings, the site was huge.
The initial images suggested the foundations of massive structures running along the banks of an ancient, now submerged river. The NIOT team knew they were on to something big. The finding was so shocking that some people at first dismissed it as a computer glitch, but the patterns were too clear, too persistent, so they went back for a closer look. And what they found next would not only confirm their suspicions, but ignite one of the fiercest debates in modern archaeology. To figure out what was really down there, the NIOT team had to get their hands on physical proof. They started the tough process of dredging the site, pulling up samples from the deep. What came to the surface was a treasure trove of artifacts that seemed to point to a sophisticated human settlement. They found thousands of pieces of pottery, beads, and fragments of sculpture. They recovered small stone tools and materials that looked like they came from ancient hearths, hinting at the presence of fire. But the most explosive find was a single piece of wood dragged up from the site. This chunk of timber was sent for radiocarbon dating to determine its age. When the results came back, they were unbelievable. 2 different labs confirmed the date. The wood was about 9,500 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. 9,500 years. That single date threatened to shatter our entire timeline of civilization. Remember the great cities of Mesopotamia? They date to around 4,000 to 3,500 BCE. The Egyptian pyramids? Built around 2,500 BCE. If this piece of wood was actually part of the city's construction, it would suggest a civilization more than 5,000 years older than any of them. It would mean that when the first stones of the pyramids were being laid, this city had already been lost to the sea for thousands of years. Proponents of the discovery, like NIOT's chief geologist, suggested this could be a mother culture that predated the Great Indus Valley Civilization. The implications were just breathtaking. The announcement of a 9,500-year-old city didn't just make waves in the academic community, it created a tsunami of skepticism. Mainstream archaeologists immediately pumped the brakes, raising serious red flags about almost every part of the discovery, and their criticisms are powerful. First and biggest of all is the dating. That 9,500-year-old date comes from one single piece of wood. Critics point out that in a place like the Gulf of Khambhat, which has powerful currents and is fed by major rivers, a piece of wood could have easily washed down from anywhere and settled on the site. As sea levels rose after the last ice age, entire forests were swallowed by the ocean, so finding ancient wood isn't uncommon. There's simply no definitive proof that the wood is connected to the structures. The second major problem is how the artifacts were collected by dredging. Think of it like scooping up random handfuls of material from the seafloor. This is the opposite of a controlled archaeological dig, where every layer is carefully removed to see how artifacts relate to each other. With dredging, objects from thousands of years apart, washed in from all over the region, could get jumbled together. This makes it almost impossible to prove the artifacts actually belonged to the so-called city. And finally, there's the city itself. Some geologists argue that the geometric shapes seen on sonar could just be natural rock formations created by the area's strong currents and geology. The whole region is tectonically active, which can create sharp, regular-looking patterns on the seafloor. Until a submersible or a team of divers can physically examine these structures up close and perform a real excavation, no one can be certain they're man-made.
Because of all this, the mainstream archaeological view is that the evidence for a 9,500-year-old city is inconclusive and highly controversial. They argue that while it's an intriguing lead, the claims just aren't backed by the rigorous proof needed to overturn a century of established history. So where does that leave us? On one side, you have proponents who see clear evidence of a revolutionary find. On the other, you have a scientific establishment demanding a much higher standard of proof. The Gulf of Khambhat cultural complex, as its supporters call it, isn't a confirmed city, but an unproven and fascinating anomaly. But for a minute, let's just ask, what if? What if the proponents are right? What would that mean? First, it would force us to completely rethink world history. It would suggest that large, organized urban living didn't start in Mesopotamia, but possibly on the Indian subcontinent thousands of years earlier. It would mean that while most of humanity was thought to be living in small hunter-gatherer groups, at least one society had already mastered large-scale architecture and social organization. This would be a monumental leap. We know that incredible construction was happening at this time. The site of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey is dated to around 9600 BCE and proves that hunter-gatherers could build sophisticated stone temples. But Göbekli Tepe is not a city. There's no evidence of large-scale housing or daily life. A city like the one claimed for Khambhat would be on a whole different level. Plus, the timing of the site's submergence fits perfectly with the end of the last ice age. About 10,000 years ago, the world's ice caps melted, causing global sea levels to rise by hundreds of feet. Is it possible that the countless flood myths found in cultures across the globe are a kind of distant cultural memory of real events, like the one that might have drowned this very site? After more than 2 decades, the mystery of the Gulf of Khambhat is still unsolved. The turbulent, muddy water makes a full-scale underwater excavation incredibly difficult and expensive. Without one, the debate is frozen in time. The sonar images hint at a metropolis. The artifacts suggest a deep history. But the final, conclusive proof remains just out of reach, buried under 120 feet of water and sediment. This isn't the lost city of Atlantis. It is not definitive proof that our history books are wrong, but it is a profound and deeply unsettling anomaly. It's a huge question mark hanging over the very beginning of our story, forcing us to ask, what else don't we know about our past? If a city of this scale could exist and then vanish beneath the waves, only to be found by accident, how many others might still be out there, waiting in the depths? And what other secrets about our ancient world have we yet to uncover? The answers are still down there, waiting.
In 1986, a nasty drought in Israel caused the Sea of Galilee to shrink, and as the waters pulled back, they revealed an echo from the past. 2 brothers from a local kibbutz were walking the newly exposed shoreline when they spotted the faint outline of a boat buried in the mud. What they'd found was a ghost, a 2,000-year-old vessel preserved in a muddy cocoon for 2 millennia. This was the exact kind of boat that would have been a common sight to Jesus and his disciples. Radiocarbon dating and pottery found nearby confirmed it sailed sometime between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD. But as archaeologists began a frantic 12-day race against the weather to excavate the fragile hull, a strange mystery came to light. The boat hadn't been wrecked in a storm or lost in some naval battle. No, it had been intentionally and methodically stripped of every single usable part: its mast, its oars, its anchor. Only then was the useless hull pushed out to sink into the lake bed. But why? Why would anyone in an age of scarcity destroy one of their most valuable tools? The answer pulls us into the turbulent and violent history of ancient Galilee, and it reveals a profoundly human story of desperation, survival, and what might have been a final, defiant act. The discovery itself was a small miracle. The brothers Moshe and Yufal Lufin had spent their lives on the sea where their family had fished for generations, always hoping to find a boat from this era. When they reported their find, a team of archaeologists and volunteers scrambled to the site, knowing just how important it was. The operation to save the boat was a desperate fight against the elements. The ancient waterlogged timbers were as soft as wet cardboard and threatened to fall apart just from being exposed to the air. For 11 days and nights, the team worked around the clock, constantly spraying the wood with water while a shelter blocked the sun. And then the irony hit. As they fought to save the boat from the water, a sudden rainstorm threatened to raise the lake level and swallow their prize. A modern reminder of the wild conditions ancient fishermen dealt with every day. To move the fragile structure, they had to encase it in a custom cocoon of fiberglass and polyurethane foam, which allowed it to be floated to a special conservation facility. It would spend the next 11 years submerged in a bath of synthetic wax. a process that slowly stabilized the wood so it could one day be displayed.
Inside and around the boat, archaeologists found clues that placed it in a specific moment in time. A simple clay cooking pot and an oil lamp, both typical of the early Roman period in Galilee. The boat itself was about 27 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, big enough for a crew of 5 and maybe a dozen passengers. It was a workhorse, a standard fishing and transport boat for its time. But as the archaeologists looked closer at how it was built, the boat began to tell a story not just of its time, but of real hardship. The boat's very bones screamed scarcity. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a vessel, patched together with at least 10 different kinds of wood. The main planks were cedar and the frames were oak, sure, but the builder had also used scraps of pine, jujube, willow, and hawthorn, whatever they could get their hands on. This wasn't the work of a master craftsman with a choice of fine materials. This was the work of someone doing whatever it took to keep their livelihood afloat. The evidence of repeated heavy repairs showed this boat had a long, hard life, maybe serving for decades. It was used until it was simply beyond fixing. This fits with what we know about first century Galilee. For the common people, the rural folk Jesus ministered to, resources were stretched dangerously thin. But that still didn't explain the final act. The most telling clues were what was missing. The boat had been systematically cannibalized. Its mast, rigging, anchor, and any other piece of wood that could be reused were carefully removed. This was a deliberate, painstaking process. Before hardware stores, every piece of seasoned wood, every nail was precious. This wasn't a chaotic shipwreck, this was an orderly decommissioning. It's possible the site was even an ancient boatyard, where old vessels were stripped for parts before their worthless hulls were dumped in the lake.
So we have two clear facts. The owners were poor and resourceful, and they got rid of their boat on purpose. But the historical context of first century Galilee hints at a motive far more gripping than just routine recycling. The boat's final years just happened to line up with one of the most violent periods in the region's history. To understand why they sank the boat, we have to zoom out from the artifact and look at the world it lived in. First century Galilee was a powder keg. Under Roman occupation, it was a land of simmering anger, crushing taxes, and explosive clashes between Jewish rebels and Roman authorities. That anger finally boiled over in 66 AD with the start of the First Jewish Revolt, a full-blown rebellion against the might of the Roman Empire. Emperor Nero sent his best general, Vespasian, to crush it. In the year 67 AD, Vespasian and his son, Titus, marched their legions, some 60,000 soldiers, into Galilee. The Jewish forces there were led by a man who would later become a famous historian, Josephus Flavius. After being captured, Josephus wrote The Jewish War, which is our main and often only source for the brutal events that followed. Josephus describes a Galilee ripped apart by violence. Cities were besieged, their people massacred, and crucially, he details a naval battle on the Sea of Galilee, right next to a town called Migdol, the very area where the boat was found 2,000 years later. Jewish rebels, many of them fishermen, used their everyday fishing boats for a desperate, doomed attack against the Romans. Josephus, who might have even seen the battle, describes a horror show. The Romans, using purpose-built rafts, easily surrounded and destroyed the Jewish fishing boats. It was a slaughter. He wrote that the Romans killed any Jew who tried to surface for air, and that the lake turned red with blood, choked with wrecked ships and the bodies of the dead. In the end, thousands of prisoners were executed or sold into slavery. It was a total, devastating defeat for the Galilean rebels.
This is where the archaeology and the history line up, giving us the most powerful explanation for the boat's fate. It wasn't just taken out of service, it was sunk in the shadow of war. And this leaves us with two possible stories, both born from the same desperate times. The first and most dramatic is that this boat was a veteran of that lost war. It could have been one of the few rebel boats that survived the battle near Migdol, limping back to shore, battered and broken. For its owners, fishermen turned freedom fighters, the revolt was over. With victorious Roman legions on their way,
They would have stripped their crippled boat of every piece of wood that could be used for a fire, to fix a home, or maybe even to make a weapon. Sinking the hull would be the final step, a way to hide the evidence of their role in the rebellion, or maybe a symbolic burial for their lost cause. The second story is quieter but just as heartbreaking. Perhaps the boat was simply too old and frail to join the fight, or its owners weren't rebels at all. But in the chaos and economic ruin that followed the Roman conquests, their faithful boat finally gave out. In a world shattered by war, resources would have been scarcer than ever. The logic of carefully recycling every last part of their most valuable possession would have been overwhelming. The boat was their livelihood, and when it died, its parts could help their family survive just a little bit longer. Sinking the hull was simply the quiet end to a long life of service, a private tragedy set against a backdrop of public catastrophe. In the end, both theories point to the same grim reality. The extreme scarcity we see in the boat's many repairs, combined with the brutal history of the first Jewish revolt, paints a clear picture. Whether it was a direct casualty of war or an indirect victim of the chaos that followed, the boat was sunk by people in a desperate situation. The act of sinking it was one of finality, driven by the cold calculus of survival in a world turned upside down.
So why do we call it the Jesus boat? Let's be clear, there is absolutely no evidence that Jesus or his disciples ever set foot on this specific vessel. But that nickname has stuck for a good reason. The boat dates precisely to the time of Jesus' ministry in Galilee. It is the exact type of boat that he and his followers, many of them fishermen from these shores, would have used every day. This discovery is so much more than an archaeological curiosity. It's a tangible link to the world described in the Gospels, a physical object that closes a 2,000-year gap. When we read about Jesus calming a storm or teaching from a boat, we can now picture this very craft. It pulls those stories off the page and into a three-dimensional, historical reality. The Galilee boat is a time capsule, not for a king or an emperor, but for the ordinary people of first-century Galilee. It tells a story of their craftsmanship, their economic struggles, and their resilience. It's a silent witness to their lives, their work, and ultimately their suffering during one of the most violent chapters of their history. The decision to sink it wasn't just about throwing something away. It was a choice loaded with the weight of history, an act of pragmatism, desperation, and maybe, just maybe, a final, quiet act of defiance. The story of the Sea of Galilee boat is really the story of its ending. It wasn't lost to the waves, but was carefully retired by its owners. The evidence etched into its timbers tells of a long life of hard work and constant repair, while a brutal war provides the most likely reason for it being deliberately sunk. It's a powerful reminder that the grand, sweeping narratives of history are really just the collection of millions of individual human lives. In the careful dismantling of this one humble fishing boat, we can almost hear the faint, 2,000-year-old echo of a family or a community making a hard choice in a desperate time, a choice that accidentally preserved their story for us to find.
What if I told you there was a lost city, older than parts of Venice, built not on solid ground but on a fragile coral reef in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean? A city made of massive volcanic pillars, some weighing up to 50 tons, built by a civilization that had no wheels, no metal tools, and no written language. Locals will tell you it was built by magic. Archaeologists call it an impossible feat of engineering. This is the story of Madol, a ghost city of stone and water, a place that just shouldn't exist. And today, we're going to explore its crumbling palaces and look beneath the waves to uncover the secrets of its lost civilization.
out in the remote Caroline Islands on the edge of Pohnpei in Micronesia lies a sprawling city of ruins that has baffled explorers for centuries. This is Nan Madol. The name itself means in the spaces between, a haunting reference to the network of tidal canals that act as its streets. It's a fitting name for a city that seems to float on water, a spectral metropolis that's earned the nickname the Venice of the Pacific. But this isn't just any city. Nan Madol is a collection of nearly 100 artificial islets, islands built by hand from colossal basalt stones and coral boulders, painstakingly erected on top of a submerged reef. It's the only ancient city on Earth built this way. For centuries, it was the political and religious heart of a mysterious dynasty, a ceremonial center teeming with high-ranking priests and nobles. The scale is just staggering. The core site covers nearly 200 acres, a maze of tombs, temples, and royal homes, all shielded from the Pacific's fury by massive seawalls. Its most impressive structure, a royal tomb called Nanduwas, has walls soaring 25 feet into the sky, built from stones so heavy it's hard to wrap your head around how they were ever lifted. Yet somehow they were. This was a city designed to project power, to inspire awe, and to stand as a monument to the gods and the kings who ruled in their name.
To understand Nan Madol, you have to understand the rulers who commanded its creation, the Saudalur dynasty. According to Pohnpeian tradition, the Saudalur were outsiders, a line of god-kings who arrived on the island around the 12th or 13th century and united its people under a single absolute rule. For nearly 500 years, they were the undisputed masters of Pohnpei. Legend says the dynasty began with two brothers, the sorcerers Olisipa and Olosopa. They were said to be much taller than the native Pohnpeians, and they arrived in a great canoe, looking for a place to build an altar to their god of agriculture. After a few false starts, they founded Nan Madol, supposedly using their magic to build a place of worship. When Olisipa passed on, Olosopa became the first Saudalur, starting a line of rulers who were seen as both kings and living gods. From their capital at Nan Madol, they controlled every part of life. The land, its resources, and all the people belonged to them. Commoners were forced to give tribute in the form of fish and fruit, a system that reportedly grew more and more oppressive over time. Some stories even speak of tyrannical rulers who practiced cannibalism and made impossible demands, creating deep resentment among the people they ruled. Nan Madol wasn't just a city, it was the ultimate fortress of power, built to separate the divine rulers from the people they governed. This brings us to the biggest, most baffling question of all. How in the world was Nan Madol actually built? The engineering here defies any simple explanation. The builders quarried enormous columns of prismatic basalt from a volcanic site on the other side of Pohnpei, some 25 miles away. They then had to transport these stones, weighing an average of 5 tons, with the largest tipping the scales at a mind-boggling 50 tons, across rugged land and open water. It's estimated that a grand total of 750,000 metric tons of basalt were used to build the city. To put that in perspective, that's like moving thousands of elephants' worth of stone without the help of wheels, pulleys, or metal tools. Once the stones got there, they were stacked in a complex crisscross pattern, a technique known as header-stretcher construction. They didn't use any mortar or concrete. The city's incredible stability comes purely from the precise placement and immense weight of these interlocking logs with coral rubble filling the gaps. Just think about the logistics, the coordination, the manpower, the sheer brute force needed over centuries is almost impossible to comprehend.
Archaeologists think they used rafts and complex leverage systems, but the exact methods remain one of history's greatest engineering mysteries, placing Nan Madol right alongside the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge as a monument to ancient human ingenuity. When you're faced with a feat this impossible, the explanations tend to split into myth, science, and wild speculation. The oldest explanation comes directly from Pohnpeian oral history. The legends are clear. The twin sorcerers didn't use brute force. They used magic to make the giant basalt columns fly into place. To this day, many locals believe supernatural forces were the true architects of Nan Madol, because no other answer seems to fit. Mainstream archaeology, of course, searches for more earthly answers. The leading scientific theory is that it was a triumph of human effort. Generations of Pohnpeians working under the command of the Saudeler could have used huge rafts to float the basalt logs during high tide. Many believe the builders had a deep understanding of water dynamics, using tides and channels to help maneuver the stones into position. With enough rope, rollers, and manpower, it was theoretically possible, but possible hardly captures the incredible difficulty. It would have been a monumental, centuries-long project requiring near-perfect organization. Then you have the more fringe theories. Some speculate that the builders had a lost technology, maybe a form of acoustic levitation. There are also persistent, though unproven tales of giant bones being found in tombs, fueling ideas of a different race of builders. Underwater surveys have searched for a larger, submerged city, but so far have only found what appear to be discarded building materials and natural coral formations, not a Micronesian Atlantis. The mystery endures because every theory, from magic to manpower, struggles to fully explain the incredible reality of what still stands on that reef today. For all its grandeur, Nan Madol was eventually abandoned. The powerful Saudeler dynasty, after centuries of rule, finally came to an end. Oral traditions tell of a warrior hero named Isake Lekel, who came from the neighboring island of Khosrae. He reportedly led an army that overthrew the last tyrannical Saudeler king and established a new, more decentralized way of governing. With the god kings gone, the ceremonial and political heart of Pompeii was no longer needed, and Nan Madol's importance simply faded away. But there were likely more practical reasons for its abandonment. Life on these artificial islands was incredibly tough. The city had no fresh water and no space to grow crops. Everything, from drinking water to food, had to be ferried in from the main island of Ponte. This made the city extremely vulnerable. Recent scientific research also offers another compelling theory: climate change. Studies of the site suggest that a period of rising sea levels and intense storms may have threatened the city's very foundations, making it harder and harder to maintain and ultimately contributing to its collapse. The city built to command the sea may have, in the end, been reclaimed by it.
Today, Nan Madol is a silent, haunting ruin, overgrown with mangroves and slowly being worn down by the relentless tide. It's a shadow of its former self. In 2016, its profound importance and fragile state were recognized when it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in danger. Silt is clogging the ancient canals, and the very coral foundations are being undermined by the sea, threatening to bring the magnificent basalt walls crashing down. The spaces between are filling in, and there's a very real fear that this wonder of the ancient world could be lost forever. Preservation efforts are underway, involving international organizations and local leaders who hold traditional authority over the site. For them, Nan Madol is not just a ruin, it is a sacred link to their ancestors, a living piece of their history. The challenge is immense. How do you protect this ancient marvel from the modern threats of climate change and decay without disturbing the spirits that are still said to linger among the stones? Nan Madol remains an anomaly, a breathtaking feat of engineering and ambition that continues to guard its secrets. It's a city of ghosts and kings, of magic and manpower. It stands as a powerful testament to a lost Pacific culture, proving that sophisticated, monumental civilizations could arise in the most remote corners of our world. How did they move those stones? Why did they build their capital on a reef? Maybe we'll never have all the answers. And perhaps that's the enduring power of Nan Madol. It forces us to wonder, to question the limits of what's possible, and to stand in awe of a mystery written in stone and water. A Pacific Stonehenge still waiting for its secrets to be unlocked.
What if one of the world's greatest myths wasn't a myth at all? What if it was a memory of a real city built by a god and then swallowed by the sea? Off the coast of India, that's the very question being asked. For thousands of years, the story of Dwarka, the legendary kingdom of Lord Krishna, was considered pure folklore. But now, strange discoveries beneath the waves are forcing us to take a second look. Could these submerged ruins really be the Golden City from the ancient tales? Let's explore the mystery of India's real-life Atlantis. First, you need to know the story. According to ancient epic texts like the Mahabharata, Dwarka was the incredible capital city founded by Lord Krishna. The legend says he asked the sea itself for a piece of land, and on that reclaimed territory, a divine city was built. And this wasn't just any city. The scriptures paint a picture of a golden city, a masterpiece of planning with massive walls, gleaming with gold, silver, and other jewels. It was a place of unbelievable wealth, filled with grand palaces and gardens. It was so secure and well-regulated that citizens were supposedly given seals to control who came in and out. For a time, it was the very center of the world. But like all golden ages, it had to end. The legends speak of a terrible war and a powerful curse that followed. After Lord Krishna departed from the earth, the city's divine protection vanished. The story goes that on the very same day, the Arabian Sea, which had once gifted the land for the city, violently took it back. The ocean poured into the streets, swallowing the gilded palaces and stunning temples. In a flash, the glorious city was gone, leaving only its name behind. This event was said to be the end of one cosmic age, the Dwapara Yuga, and the start of our own, the Kali Yuga. For millennia, that's where the story concluded, a powerful myth about divine power and tragic loss. So, is any of it true? In the 20th century, a handful of pioneering archaeologists decided to find out. The first real dig started around the 1960s, but it was the work of Dr. S.R. Rao and his team from India's National Institute of Oceanography in the 1980s that really changed the game. They led a series of underwater expeditions off the coast of the modern city of Dwarka in Gujarat, the very place the legends pointed to. What they started finding was incredible. Just a short distance from the shore, they discovered evidence of what looked like a massive, organized town buried under the waves. The ancient myth was about to go head-to-head with modern science. The discoveries were staggering. Underwater teams documented huge stone blocks, pillars, and fortified foundations, all suggesting a well-planned ancient city submerged, just as the legends claimed. Even more importantly, they found artifacts that hinted at a major port city. Divers recovered numerous stone anchors, which led Dr. Rao to argue that Dwarka was once a major hub for maritime trade. Pottery, beads, and even inscribed copper objects were brought to the surface. Based on these findings, Dr. Rao made a bold claim. He believed he had found Krishna's Dwarka, dating back to around 1500 to 1700 BC, a time that could overlap with the era of the Mahabharata. In his view, the discovery had turned myth into history. However, it's not that simple, and not everyone is convinced. While most experts agree that a significant ancient port city existed here, the direct link to Krishna's Dwarka is still a hot debate. Skeptics point out that the dating of the site is tricky. The ruins span a huge range of time, from the late Harappan period to the Middle Ages, making it hard to connect them to a single event like the Mahabharata. Some experts have also questioned Dr. Rao's interpretations, suggesting that some structures could be natural rock formations, or that artifacts like the stone anchors might actually be from much later medieval periods. The mystery is far from solved, and the Archaeological Survey of India has recently launched new expeditions using modern tech to get a clearer picture. The waters off the Dwarka coast are hiding a major secret. Deep beneath the surface lie the ruins of an ancient city, proof that early Indian civilizations had advanced knowledge of city building and sea trade. We have the legend of a golden city built by a god, and we have the ruins of a powerful port that was lost to the sea. But are they the same place? Do these submerged walls prove the historical truth behind one of humanity's greatest stories? For now, Dwarka is both a sacred pilgrimage site and a profound archaeological puzzle.
What if one of humanity's oldest stories, a story most people dismiss as a myth, has a real historical event at its core? For thousands of years, the tale of a great world-ending flood has been passed down through generations. It's a powerful story, but one generally considered a fable. But what if there's a kernel of truth to it? Deep beneath the dark, still waters of the Black Sea, an incredible discovery has forced scientists to look again at this ancient legend. We're talking about a fleet of perfectly preserved ghost ships, time capsules from a lost world. Their pristine condition points to a unique, deadly environment at the bottom of the sea, which in turn has given new life to a controversial theory about a single, cataclysmic event, a massive, rapid flood. Could this event, which permanently changed the Black Sea, be the historical seed for the legend of the Great Flood? We're going to dive into the evidence, the theories, and the fierce debate. More than a mile beneath the waves off the coast of Bulgaria, there's a scene that archaeologists thought they'd only ever see in stories. It's a shipwreck graveyard. But forget splintered, decaying timbers. These are ghost ships, looking as if they sank yesterday. In 2018, the Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project, or Black Sea MAP, sent a remote-operated vehicle into these dark waters and found something breathtaking. It was a 75-foot-long Greek merchant vessel, lying on its side. Its mast was still standing, its rudders were in place, and even the rowing benches were intact. Scientists from the University of Southampton carbon dated a small piece of the ship, and the results were stunning. The vessel was over 2,400 years old, making it the oldest intact shipwreck ever discovered.
John Adams, the project's lead investigator, said, "A ship surviving intact from the classical world is something I would never have believed possible." And he was right to be shocked. In any other ocean, a wooden ship that old would have been devoured by marine life and torn apart by currents centuries ago. Yet here it was, looking like it sailed right off the side of an ancient Greek vase. In fact, it's a near-perfect match for the ship depicted on the famous Siren vase in the British Museum, which shows Odysseus tied to the mast. And it wasn't alone. The expedition found over 65 shipwrecks, a lost fleet telling 2,500 years of history. They found Roman trading vessels, their cargo of amphorae still sealed, Byzantine warships, and 17th century Cossack raiding ships. On some, you can still see the original tool marks on the timbers and coils of rope on the deck. But this incredible discovery raised an even bigger question. How is it possible for these ships to be so perfectly preserved? The answer isn't about the ships themselves, but the unique, deadly nature of the sea that holds them. The Black Sea is unlike almost any other body of water on Earth. Think of it as a layered cake. The top layer, down to about 150 meters, is familiar seawater full of life. But below that, something changes dramatically. The water becomes completely anoxic. It has zero oxygen. This oxygen-free zone is a death trap for most living things. The wood-eating organisms that would normally make a meal out of a sunken ship can't survive there. So any vessel that sinks deep enough into the Black Sea is essentially sealed in a time capsule, protected from decay for thousands of years. This anoxic layer is the secret to the ghost ship's incredible preservation.
Scientists have known about this anoxic layer for a long time, but seeing this perfectly preserved fleet brought a new focus to an old question. How did the Black Sea get this way? The investigation into that question led to a theory that could reframe our understanding of ancient history, a theory of a flood so immense it almost defies belief. In the late 1990s, two Columbia University geologists, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, introduced a radical idea, the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Their research suggested that thousands of years ago, the Black Sea wasn't a sea at all. It was a huge, isolated, freshwater lake that sat far below the level of the Mediterranean Sea. A natural land bridge, where Turkey's Bosporus Strait is today, acted like a dam, holding back the salt water of the Mediterranean. But as the last ice age ended, glaciers melted and sea levels across the world rose. Ryan and Pittman proposed that around 7,600 years ago, the rising Mediterranean finally crested that dam. Their initial theory described a catastrophic failure. Water poured through the breach with the force of 200 Niagara Falls, causing the Black Sea's level to rise by as much as 6 inches a day. Every day, the shoreline would have raced inland, swallowing everything in its path. This wasn't just a flood, it was a deluge that fundamentally changed the water's chemistry, creating the deep anoxic layer we see today. Famed explorer Robert Ballard, who discovered the Titanic, led expeditions to test this idea. His team found what they believed was compelling evidence, an ancient submerged shoreline hundreds of feet below the current surface, along with shells of extinct freshwater mollusks. They also discovered what they identified as remains of human settlements, including structures they identified as wattle and daub preserved in the mud. The timing of this proposed event is key. The Black Sea Deluge, as first described by Ryan and Pittman, would have happened around 5600 BCE. This date got a lot of people excited because it aligns with the general time frame for the cultural memory that could have eventually become the story of Noah's Ark and even earlier Mesopotamian flood stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The theory suggests that the terrifying, unstoppable flood would have displaced countless people living around the fertile freshwater lake. These survivors, fleeing in all directions, would have carried the traumatic memory of their world being swallowed by the sea. Proponents of the hypothesis ask, could this collective trauma, passed down through generations, be the historical seed of the Great Flood narrative? The story of an angry god sending a world-ending flood with one family surviving on a boat is a powerful myth found in cultures all over the world. Advocates for the deluge hypothesis argue this isn't a coincidence, but a memory. The story may have been embellished over time, a regional, catastrophic flood remembered as a global one, but the core of the event, a civilization-destroying flood, remained. In this light, the ghost ships take on a new meaning. While they sank thousands of years after the proposed flood, their perfect preservation is a direct result of the deadly anoxic environment that the deluge theory seeks to explain. Of course, a theory this grand and dramatic is bound to have its critics, and the Black Sea deluge hypothesis is fiercely debated. While most scientists agree that a major flooding event occurred, they clash over its speed and scale. A growing body of research suggests the transition from a freshwater lake to a saltwater sea was far more gradual, happening over many decades or even centuries, not in a single violent event. Some studies of the geology of the seafloor found no evidence for a catastrophic, high-velocity flow of water. In this view, settlements were submerged, but people may have had generations to adapt and move. Critics also correctly point out that even the most dramatic version of the Black Sea flood was a regional event, not a global one that covered the highest mountains as described in Genesis. Flood myths exist in cultures far from the Black Sea, like in the Americas and Australia, which can't be explained by this single event. Furthermore, Robert Ballard's claims of finding man-made structures are not universally accepted by all archaeologists. This scientific skepticism is healthy. The core facts that the Black Sea was once a freshwater lake and that ancient shorelines were flooded are largely undisputed. The debate is over how it happened, but the ghost ships remain, perfectly preserved, waiting for the final verdict. So, what can we say for certain? We know that a fleet of ghost ships rests deep in the Black Sea, preserved in a way found nowhere else on Earth. We know this is only possible because the deep water is a lifeless, oxygen-free zone. And we have strong evidence that this deadly environment was created when saltwater from the Mediterranean poured in, transforming a freshwater lake and drowning an ancient landscape. Does this discovery prove that the biblical Great Flood actually happened? The short answer is no. The biblical story is a matter of faith, and this was a regional, not global event. But what the science does suggest is that a real, terrifying, and memorable flood of epic proportions likely occurred right around the time and place where the flood myths of the ancient Near East may have originated. It doesn't prove the myth, but it gives the myth a plausible, historical anchor. It reminds us that sometimes the most enduring legends are not just stories. They are the echoes of real events, of real human trauma and survival. And it leaves us with a tantalizing question. If the Great Flood might be rooted in a real event, what other ancient myths are just waiting for the right discovery to bring them back to life?
Deep in the Atlantic Ocean, there's a chain of volcanic islands bursting with breathtaking beauty and profound mystery, the Azores. For centuries, people have whispered their name in the same breath as the greatest maritime legend of all time, the lost city of Atlantis. Most wrote it off as a tall tale, but in 2013, a strange discovery threatened to drag that myth out of the sea and into reality. It all started when a local sailor, Diocleciano Silva, was hunting for good fishing spots between the islands of San Miguel and Terceira. He was watching his sonar when a reading came back that was anything but ordinary. A massive, perfectly shaped pyramid appeared on his screen, a structure that could have been hidden for millennia. The question that immediately sparked a firestorm of debate was unavoidable. Was this just a bizarre trick of nature, or the first real proof of a lost ancient civilization? Diocleciano Silva's accidental find had all the makings of a history-changing moment. His equipment, which maps the seafloor, picked up a colossal underwater object. The data was stunning. The structure was reported to be about 60 meters high, with a huge base covering 8,000 square meters. But it wasn't just the size that was so shocking, it was the shape. Silva reported a structure that appeared to be a perfect square. What really turned heads was his claim that its four faces were almost perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This is a famous feature of some of the world's most iconic ancient monuments, including the Great Pyramids of Giza. And here it was, a shape that seemed to defy natural explanation, submerged under 40 meters of ocean. The news caused a stir in Portuguese media and soon spread to mystery lovers across the globe. Had Silva found a temple? A tomb? Something else entirely? The Portuguese Navy's Hydrographic Institute was quickly brought in to investigate and figure out if this was a genuine artifact or just a geological fluke. But it was the location itself that really fanned the flames, connecting this modern discovery to a very ancient legend. The Azores have long been a top candidate for the location of Atlantis. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato described Atlantis as a powerful naval civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what most historians now call the Strait of Gibraltar. He wrote that in a single day and night of disaster, this advanced society vanished into the sea. Sitting far west of Portugal, the Azores are right in the region Plato described. These 9 islands are actually the peaks of massive underwater mountains along the mid-Atlantic ridge, a hotspot for volcanic and tectonic activity. For those who believe the legend, the Azores aren't just islands. They're the last visible mountaintops of a sunken continent. So, when Diocleciano Silva announced he'd found a giant, perfectly formed pyramid on the seafloor right there, it felt like the ultimate "I told you so." It fit the story perfectly: an advanced civilization, a cataclysmic event, and a forgotten structure just waiting to be rediscovered. The discovery didn't just revive the Atlantis theory, it also brought up stories of other ancient mariners who might have built such a monument. But this powerful legend was about to clash with the cold, hard facts of a scientific investigation. When the Portuguese Navy and its Hydrographic Institute looked into the anomaly, the excitement was quickly met with scientific skepticism. Geologically speaking, the Azores are one of the most dynamic places on Earth, sitting where 3 massive tectonic plates grind against each other. This means one thing: volcanoes. A lot of them. The official scientific opinion is that the pyramid is a natural formation. The Navy suggested that what Silva detected was likely the Di João de Castro Bank, a well-known submarine volcano in that exact spot. Underwater volcanoes can create pyramid-like mounds as lava cools and builds up. Over time, natural fractures and erosion from deep-sea currents can easily create features that look like flat sides and sharp edges.
Furthermore, officials pointed out that Silva's sonar equipment might not have been high-resolution enough, which could make a rounded natural volcanic hill appear artificially sharp and symmetrical on screen. Researchers at the University of Azores, after reviewing the data, were blunt. They said the pyramid didn't exist and was the result of incorrect readings. To this day, no peer-reviewed scientific paper has ever confirmed the structure is man-made. The scientific consensus leans heavily toward it being a stunning, but ultimately natural product of our planet's geology. Just when science seems to have closed the book, another mystery pops up, this time on dry land. For years, a group called the Portuguese Association of Archaeological Research, or APIA, has been making some controversial claims. They say they've found evidence of human life in the Azores that predates the arrival of the Portuguese in the 15th century by thousands of years. On several islands, especially Terceira and Pico, they've documented what they believe is prehistoric rock art, megalithic structures, and even small, pyramid-shaped rock piles. Some of these formations even seem to be aligned with the solstices, suggesting they were built for a specific purpose. These claims, however, are hotly debated. Mainstream historians argue the evidence isn't definitive and could just be natural formations or constructions from a much later period. The Historical Institute of Terceira once dismissed similar claims as being more fantasy than reality. So while this land-based evidence isn't directly connected to the underwater pyramid, it does add a tantalizing layer to the mystery, fueling the idea that an unknown culture might have called these islands home long before recorded history. So we have a strange shape underwater and controversial ruins on the land above. But what about the tunnels in the title? Are there secret passages leading into the sunken world? This is where we need to draw a firm line between investigation and imagination. There is currently zero credible scientific evidence of any man-made tunnels in the waters around the Azores. These stories appear to be a total invention, an embellishment added to the pyramid mystery. However, the region's volcanic nature does create massive networks of underground structures. Volcanic eruptions form lava tubes, which are basically natural tunnels created by flowing lava. When these areas get submerged, they become complex underwater cave systems. It's very likely that any talk of tunnels is just a misinterpretation of these real, but entirely natural volcanic caves. The idea of secret Atlantean tunnels is exciting, but it remains pure fiction. So what's really lurking in the depths off the coast of the Azores? Is it a stunning trick of geology, where volcanoes and ocean currents just happen to create a shape that mimics our own ancient designs? Or is it a clue to a lost chapter of human history, a remnant of a civilization that disappeared beneath the waves? On one hand, there's the story of Diocleciano Silva's discovery, an image of a perfectly aligned structure that sparked the imagination. On the other, there's the sober assessment of scientists who point to the De Juan de Castro Bank, a natural volcanic seamount. After all this time, the Azorean pyramid remains a powerful symbol of the unknown. It's a reminder of how easily the line between fact and fiction can blur. And it leaves us with a lingering question. How much more of our planet's history is still hiding, waiting to be discovered, just beneath the waves? For those who believe, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most important archaeological sites on Earth. The evidence, they say, is carved right into the stone. The structure is massive, with its main feature measuring about 100 meters long and 60 meters wide, rising to a height of about 25 meters from the seabed. This is no random pile of rocks. It's a series of stunningly geometric and seemingly deliberate features that aren't so easy to explain away. The biggest champion of the man-made theory is Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist from Japan's University of the Ryukyus. After spending years personally diving, mapping, and studying the site, he's completely convinced. He argues that the sheer density of strange geometric features makes a natural origin almost statistically impossible. So let's look at what he and others have found. The main attraction is a massive, stepped, pyramid-like structure with enormous terraces and platforms that are strikingly flat. Its lines are sharp, and its angles, often appearing as clean 90-degree corners, seem far too precise to be an accident. One area, nicknamed the Loop Road, appears to circle a part of the monument. Another section looks just like a grand staircase leading up into the deep. Professor Kimura's analysis goes even further. He's identified structures he believes were built for a reason: a stadium, grand arches, and even formations he interprets as carvings in the rock. He points to features that look like animals, including one he calls the underwater sphinx, which he claims looks like ancient Okinawan or Chinese rulers. Maybe the most mind-bending claim is the monument's potential age. If it was built by people, it had to have been when the sea level was much lower, before the end of the last ice age. Kimura and other supporters have suggested the structure could be over 10,000 years old. To put that in perspective, the Great Pyramids are about 4,500 years old, and Stonehenge is around 5,000. If true, Yonaguni would be a contemporary of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, one of the oldest known monumental structures on the planet, and would force us to completely rethink the timeline of human civilization. This theory has attracted people like author Graham Hancock, who believes Yonaguni is a key piece of evidence for a sophisticated global civilization that was lost to the Ice Age. To them, this isn't just a Japanese mystery, it's a forgotten chapter of human history, drowned and hidden by time. But what does the science say? For every person who argues it's man-made, there's a geologist urging caution and offering a very different take. The leading voice of skepticism belongs to Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist who famously challenged the conventional date of the Great Sphinx of Giza. After diving the site himself, Schoch came away with a firm conclusion: the Yonaguni Monument is a natural formation. He argues that the entire structure is made of sandstone, a type of sedimentary rock that's known for breaking along straight, predictable lines. Think of it like a piece of wood. When it splits, it often breaks cleanly along the grain. Sandstone acts in a similar way.
The area around Yonaguni Island is also in a zone of intense seismic activity, right near a tectonic fault line. This means the bedrock is under constant pressure from earthquakes that can cause it to crack and shear in these remarkably geometric patterns. According to this theory, the terraces and steps are just the horizontal layers of sandstone breaking away. The walls and right angles are the result of vertical fractures caused by all that tectonic stress. The powerful ocean currents in the area, especially the strong Kuroshio current, then act like a relentless sculptor, washing away loose rock over thousands of years and making the sharp, blocky appearance even more pronounced.
Skeptics also point to a huge lack of other evidence. In any undisputed ancient city, archaeologists find tons of artifacts, pottery, tools, art, and the remains of the people who lived there. At Yonaguni, despite decades of looking, no definitive man-made tools or artifacts have been found on or around the main structure. The carvings that Kimura identified are dismissed by geologists as nothing more than natural scratches and erosion marks on the rock. They argue that nature is more than capable of creating shapes that look artificial to our pattern-seeking brains. While the Yonaguni Monument is a spectacular and unusual geological wonder, it's not, in their view, fundamentally unique. To geologists, it's a case of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns in random shapes. It's a magnificent trick of geology, but a trick nonetheless. Beyond the scientific debate, the monument is wrapped in a deeper, older layer of mystery, the world of myth. It's often called Japan's Atlantis, a powerful nickname that brings to mind the universal story of a great civilization lost to the waves. While that comparison might be symbolic, the monument connects with real Okinawan folklore. Local legends speak of a mythical paradise of the gods known as Nirai Kanai, a land across the sea from which all life and happiness come. Some have wondered if the Yonaguni Monument could be a physical link to these ancient beliefs, a gateway to a sacred, now submerged land. There's also the question of who could have possibly built it. If it is man-made and as old as some claim, it might be linked to Japan's prehistoric Jomon people. The Jomon culture, which began as early as 12,000 BC, is known for creating some of the world's first pottery. However, they were traditionally seen as a hunter-gatherer society, and building something on the scale of Yonaguni would require a level of social organization and technology that mainstream archaeology doesn't currently believe they had.
This lack of a clear builder only makes the puzzle deeper. Was there another unknown culture in this region during the Ice Age? Professor Kimakura has even floated a connection to the fabled lost continent of Mu, a legendary Pacific civilization said to have been wiped out in a cataclysm. While ideas like that are definitely outside the scientific mainstream, they show the powerful pull the monument has on our imagination, inviting us to wonder about the deepest secrets of our past. For those who want to see it for themselves, exploring the Yonaguni Monument is a real adventure. It's in surprisingly shallow water, with its highest point just 5 meters below the surface and its base around 25 meters down. However, the dive isn't for everyone. The area is known for strong, unpredictable currents, making it accessible to divers of all levels, but experience is highly recommended for safety. Those who make the trip describe a surreal and awe-inspiring experience. Descending into the clear blue water and seeing that massive stone structure emerge from the gloom is a moment few forget. Divers can swim along what feel like ancient hallways, float over huge flat plazas, and ascend the enormous staircases. The sheer scale and silent, imposing presence of the monument create a profound sense of wonder, no matter what its origin is. And the site isn't just a geological or archaeological marvel, it's a vibrant marine ecosystem. The same currents that may have shaped the monument also bring rich nutrients, attracting a stunning array of sea life. divers often encounter massive schools of migrating hammerhead sharks, especially between November and June. Sea turtles, manta rays, and huge schools of tropical fish are common sights, adding another layer of life and beauty to this enigmatic place. The experience is a unique mix of adventure, natural wonder, and the thrill of exploring one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries.
So, after decades of research, countless dives, and fierce debate, what's the final word? The truth is, the mystery of the Yonaguni monument is still very much unsolved. It exists in a fascinating gray area between hard science and speculation, a place where our knowledge of geology crashes into our desire to believe in a lost, heroic past. On one hand, there's the compelling visual evidence, the pyramid-like form, the sharp angles, the grand staircases, and the passionate conviction of researchers like Masaiki Kimura who are sure it's man-made. A 10,000-year-old city wouldn't just rewrite Japanese history, it would rewrite the history of the world. On the other hand, there's the solid geological explanation, a story of tectonic pressure, natural fractures, and the relentless power of ocean currents carving a masterpiece of erosion out of sandstone. This theory is backed by the lack of definitive artifacts and the knowledge that nature can sometimes create stunning illusions of order out of chaos. Today, the investigation continues. Researchers use advanced tech like underwater sonar and 3D modeling to create ever more detailed images of the site, hoping to find a clue that will finally settle the debate. But for now, no definitive proof has emerged to sway the scientific consensus one way or the other. Whether it's a testament to a long-lost civilization or one of nature's most magnificent deceptions, the Yonaguni Monument forces us to question the limits of our known history. It stands as a silent, submerged reminder that there are still vast, unexplored frontiers on our own planet, and that the ocean still holds some of our deepest secrets.
For centuries, we've been captivated by the legend of Atlantis. It's a great story, but just a myth, right? Well, what if the story was real, but everyone was looking in the wrong place? Cut to 2001, off the western coast of Cuba. A team of marine engineers are mapping the ocean floor, looking for old Spanish treasure ships. Instead, their sonar starts painting a picture of something impossible. Down at depths of 600 to 750 meters, that's over 2,000 feet, in the crushing blackness, they find what looks like a city. Symmetrical, geometric structures that look unmistakably man-made. Images suggested pyramids and buildings spread across a huge underwater plain. Here's the problem. According to mainstream science, no known culture had the ability to build something like this when that land last saw the sun. So, what exactly are we looking at? Is this proof of a lost civilization that could rewrite history? Or is it just one of the most incredible tricks of nature ever recorded? It all started in 2001. A Canadian company, Advanced Digital Communications, led by marine engineer Polina Zalitsky and her husband Paul Weinsweg, was working with the Cuban government. Suddenly, their high-tech side-scan sonar began picking up a strange series of stone structures. The sonar images showed organized stones across a 2-square-kilometer area, suggesting an urban development where only a barren seafloor should be.
The news exploded, with headlines buzzing about a Caribbean Atlantis. To get a better look, Zalitsky and Weinsweg sent down a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. The video beamed back images of massive blocks of stone that looked like they were carved from granite, some neatly stacked on top of each other. Zalitsky called it a wonderful structure, which really looks like it could have been a large urban center, but she was careful, adding it would be totally irresponsible to say what it was before we have evidence. This is where the story splits in two. On one side, you have the incredible images. Proponents argue that the clean lines, the symmetry, and the sheer scale of the formations,
what look like roads and buildings, point to intelligent design. If they're right, this city could rewrite our understanding of the ancient world. But on the other side, there's a wall of scientific skepticism. The biggest hurdle is the depth. Marine geologist Manuel Iturralde, who studied the findings, estimated it would have taken about 50,000 years for that land to sink so deep. As he bluntly put it, 50,000 years ago, there wasn't the architectural capacity in any of the cultures we know of to build complex buildings. Other experts agree. They point out that sonar images can fool you, making our brains see patterns and randomness, a phenomenon called pareidolia. Iturralde admitted the formations are extremely peculiar, but also reminded everyone that nature can create some truly unimaginable structures. One archaeologist from Florida State University summed it up perfectly. The structures are out of time and out of place.
Maybe the strangest part of this whole story isn't the discovery, but what happened next. Almost nothing. After the initial media frenzy, the story just faded. While there were some follow-up studies for a few years, no major scientific expedition ever returned for a full-scale investigation. No one has ever brought a physical piece of that supposed granite to the surface to be analyzed. So, why the silence? The lack of follow-up has fueled theories about a deliberate cover-up, with some arguing that the discovery is just too inconvenient for our established historical timelines. A more likely reason is that the story simply went cold because experts were unconvinced. The original sonar scans, while fascinating, are a lot less clear than the dramatic 3D artistic renderings that you see online. Without a modern, high-resolution survey, the truth is stuck under 2,000 feet of water and 2 decades of speculation. The sunken city off the coast of Cuba remains one of the most tantalizing and frustrating mysteries out there. The evidence is just compelling enough to ignite the imagination, but way too thin to satisfy scientific standards. It's trapped in a gray area between a history-changing discovery and a simple geological quirk. Until a new expedition with better technology heads back to the Wanahakabib Peninsula, the truth will stay right where it's been for over 20 years, lost in the deep.
The deep sea is one of the last great mysteries on Earth. We've mapped the surface of Mars with incredible detail, but our own ocean floor, it's still a world of secrets, hidden under miles of cold, dark, crushing water. And sometimes, down in that darkness, you find something that just doesn't make any sense. Deep beneath the surface of the Baltic Sea, a team of ocean explorers stumbled upon something that would spark a decade-long mystery. Their sonar picked up a massive, strangely circular-looking object, about 200 feet across, just sitting on the seabed. But this was no ordinary rock. As their equipment started acting bizarrely and strange images came into focus, one thought became unavoidable. This was not natural. It was June 2011, and the Swedish-based Ocean X team, led by Peter Lindberg and Dennis Osberg, was on the hunt for old shipwrecks filled with treasure. The search had been a bust, and they were heading home. On one last pass with their side-scan sonar, an image popped up on the screen that stopped them dead in their tracks. There, at a depth of nearly 300 feet, was a huge, roughly circular formation about 60 meters wide, roughly the size of a jumbo jet. The shape was so distinct, so out of place, that it was quickly nicknamed the Baltic Sea Anomaly. With its disc-like shape, it didn't take long for people to point out its uncanny resemblance to the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The team knew they'd found something weird, but they had no idea how deep the rabbit hole would go. This is where the story gets really strange. When the Ocean X team sailed back for a closer look, they claimed something unexplainable started happening. They reported that as soon as their ship was positioned directly over the object, their electronics went haywire. Satellite phones cut out, cameras wouldn't work. Diver Stefan Hagerborn said,
Anything electric out there, and the satellite phone as well, stopped working when we were above the object. Then when we got away about 200 meters, it turned on again.
This strange electronic interference, which has never been independently verified, wasn't the only puzzle. The team's low-resolution sonar scans seemed to show a long gouge in the seabed leading to the object, almost like a skid mark stretching for hundreds of meters. It looked as if this thing had crashed and skidded to a stop. Divers even reported seeing what looked like stairways on its surface. Every new detail from the team only made the whole thing more confusing. Once the story went public, the scientific community stepped in with a much more down-to-earth explanation. Geologist Volker Bruckert from Stockholm University was given rock samples that the Oceanx team had recovered from the object. His analysis was pretty clear. The samples were just granite, gneiss, and sandstone. In other words, they were completely ordinary rocks, the exact kind of rocks you'd expect to find in a basin carved out by glaciers during the last ice age. The scientific consensus is that the anomaly is a natural rock formation. Experts argue that glaciers are powerful enough to move and drop massive, oddly shaped boulders. They also point out that the team's sonar equipment was low resolution and could have easily created a distorted, misleading image. To scientists, there was no evidence of metals or anything to suggest it was a machine. The case was closed. It's just a big, weird-looking rock. But that simple explanation doesn't sit right with everyone. If it's just a rock, what about the reported equipment failures? That one question has kept a lot of other theories alive and kicking. The most popular one, of course, is that the anomaly is a crashed UFO. A disc-shaped object, an apparent crash track, and a mysterious energy field. It's a story that practically writes itself. Other ideas suggest it could be a sunken man-made structure from a lost civilization, like an underwater Stonehenge. Some have even floated the theory that it's a secret Nazi anti-submarine weapon from World War II. While there's zero hard evidence for any of these wild theories, they're fueled by the fact that the simple, scientific answer doesn't seem to explain all the strange details of the team's story. We're left with two very different stories. On one hand, science tells us this is a natural formation, a chunk of rock left behind by a glacier thousands of years ago. On the other hand, we have the first-hand accounts from the Oceanx team of bizarre electrical interference and an object that just doesn't look natural. For now, the truth about the Baltic Sea anomaly remains right where the team found it, buried in the cold, dark waters, waiting to be discovered.
Imagine a force of nature so powerful it could rip the coastline away from one of the ancient world's greatest cities. One day, the sea itself pulled back in an unnatural, terrifying silence, leaving ships stranded on the sand. Then it returned with apocalyptic force. It swallowed palaces, temples, and treasures, helping to erase the heart of a legendary queen's royal city from the face of the earth. For over 1,600 years, the magnificent world of Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, lay hidden beneath the waves, dismissed by many as just a legend. Until now. In the murky depths of the Mediterranean, divers are penetrating layers of sand and time, and what they're finding is rewriting history. They're seeing not just stones and rubble, but serene, colossal faces staring up from the seabed, grand obelisks covered in barnacles, and the marble-floored foundations of a palace that was once the center of the world. This is the story of a lost city's cataclysmic end and its stunning rebirth, as modern explorers reveal the secrets of Cleopatra's drowned palace. Before its destruction, Alexandria was a city that gave Rome a run for its money. Founded by Alexander the Great, it was the shimmering capital of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a global hub of knowledge, culture, and power. Its library was the stuff of legend, its people cosmopolitan, and its skyline was dominated by the Pharos Lighthouse, a titan of stone and fire that stood as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. At the very heart of all this splendor was the Royal Quarter, an exclusive island district known as Antirodos. This is where Cleopatra's palace stood, surrounded by lush gardens and sacred temples. From this seat of power, she commanded a kingdom, captivated Roman generals, and fought to keep her dynasty alive against the unstoppable ambition of Rome. She was a brilliant political mind, fluent in multiple languages, and a figure of immense power. She even declared herself the reincarnation of the goddess Isis, and her palace was designed to reflect that divine, opulent authority. But no dynasty, no matter how powerful, can command the earth and sea. The doom of Alexandria wasn't a swift military conquest, but a slow, relentless assault by nature. For centuries, the very ground beneath the city was unstable, gradually sinking. Then, on a summer day in 365 AD, the breaking point arrived. A massive earthquake, one of the most violent of antiquity, rocked the eastern Mediterranean. It triggered a catastrophic tsunami that swept over the coast, flooding the city and killing tens of thousands. In the centuries that followed, repeated quakes and the slow, steady sinking of the land ensured that what the tsunami wrecked, the sea would claim forever. Cleopatra's island of Antirodos, her palace, and a huge part of the city's glorious coastline slipped beneath the waves, vanishing from sight and eventually from memory. For more than 16 centuries, the palace was nothing more than a ghost, a story in ancient texts. Its true location was lost, a mystery that fueled all kinds of speculation. Did it ever really exist as the stories claimed? The answer was buried under more than 20 feet of water and sediment, where it would stay until the 1990s. That's when a new age of exploration began, led by pioneering underwater archaeologists like Frank Gaudio. Armed with sophisticated tech, sonar mapping, advanced magnetometers, and a passion for lost worlds, Gaudio and his teams began the painstaking work of surveying the murky waters of Alexandria's eastern harbor. The challenge was immense. Visibility there can be terrible, and centuries of sand had formed a thick blanket over the ancient city. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, only the haystack was the size of a city district. But slowly, incredibly, the legend started to become real. The first discoveries were staggering. The team's electronic surveys revealed man-made shapes hidden beneath the seabed. Divers descended into the quiet blue-green world and found themselves face to face with the impossible. They didn't just find a few scattered stones, but thousands of architectural artifacts. They found colossal red granite columns, some shattered, others perfectly intact. They found more than 24 sphinxes, their enigmatic faces staring into the aquatic gloom, silent guardians of a lost kingdom. Perhaps most astonishingly, they found massive obelisks and colossal statues, carved in both classical Greek and traditional pharaonic styles. Some of these monuments had markings from the time of Ramses II. This revealed a fascinating truth. Cleopatra's dynasty had repurposed even older Egyptian treasures to decorate their capital, blending the glory of the past with the power of their present. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Amidst a forest of fallen columns, the team uncovered the foundations of a massive building, its floors still paved with marble. At nearly 300 feet long, its location and grandeur provided compelling evidence that this had to be it, the lost palace of Cleopatra. Nearby, they found the remains of a small temple dedicated to the goddess Isis, confirming the deep religious devotion that filled the royal quarter. They found gold jewelry, imported ceramics, and coins bearing the faces of Ptolemaic rulers, each object a tangible link to the life and times of the city's elite. They weren't just excavating ruins, they were excavating the very world of the last queen of Egypt. Each artifact brought out of the water is more than just a treasure, it's a piece of a grand, complex puzzle. The discoveries in Alexandria's harbor have completely transformed our understanding of Cleopatra's city. Ancient historians described its greatness, but the submerged ruins proved it. The mix of Egyptian and Greek art shows a truly cosmopolitan society, a cultural melting pot where different traditions came together.
For the first time, we have a direct, unfiltered glimpse into the world Cleopatra lived in, not from the biased accounts of her Roman enemies, but from the very stones of her palace. The science of the disaster itself is a story of immense power. The 365 AD earthquake and tsunami were the final devastating blows, but the silent creeping threat of land subsidence had been sealing Alexandria's fate for generations.
This combination of a sudden cataclysm and slow decay is what both destroyed the royal quarter and, weirdly enough, preserved it. The layers of sand that buried the ruins protected them from the ravages of time and people, creating an archaeological time capsule on a scale rarely seen. Yet for all that has been found, the biggest mysteries remain. Chief among them is the final resting place of Cleopatra and her lover, Mark Antony. Ancient writers claimed they were buried together in a magnificent tomb. Despite nearly 2 decades of searching at sites like Taposiris Magna, their tomb has not been found. The search continues, with recent discoveries of tunnels and artifacts fueling hope that we are closer than ever to solving one of history's greatest enigmas. While some secrets remain elusive, technology is letting us see the sunken city in a way that was once unimaginable. Through a remarkable process called photogrammetry, thousands of underwater photographs are stitched together to create breathtakingly detailed 3D models of the ruins. Teams are digitally reassembling the fragments of the legendary Pharos lighthouse, block by massive block, allowing us to virtually walk through its gates for the first time in centuries. These digital reconstructions aren't just for show. They let researchers test theories about how these magnificent structures were built and why they collapsed. It is a digital resurrection, bringing the splendor of ancient Alexandria back to life. In the end, the sunken world of Alexandria is where legend and archaeology truly collide. It's a story of unimaginable loss, of a city of light and knowledge extinguished by the unforgiving power of nature. But it's also a story of incredible discovery, of a lost chapter of history being pieced back together by dedicated explorers and groundbreaking technology. The serene faces of the statues, the towering obelisks, and the silent palace floors all speak of the ambition, artistry, and complexity of Cleopatra's era. They are a poignant testament to how fragile even the greatest empires are, and how fleeting human creation can be against the forces of the natural world. What was lost for over a millennium is now being found, and as long as divers continue to explore these depths, the secrets of Cleopatra's drowned palace will continue to rise from the silence of the sea.
The whole idea of Atlantis starts with the Greek philosopher Plato. He told the story of a powerful island empire, an incredible feat of engineering that existed 9,000 years before his own time. As the legend goes, this entire civilization vanished into the ocean in a single day and night. For centuries, most people wrote it off as just a story. But that all changed in 1968 when divers near the island of North Bimini found something that brought the legend roaring back to life. What they found seemed to match a bizarrely specific prophecy. Years earlier, the American mystic Edgar Cayce claimed that proof of Atlantis would literally rise from the sea near Bimini right around 1968 or 1969. And then, right on schedule, there it was, a half-mile stretch of huge rectangular limestone blocks sitting in only about 20 feet of water. It looked just like a road, or maybe a seawall, or the base of some huge structure. The Bimini Road, as it was called, became an instant global phenomenon. Had Casey's prediction actually come true? Was this the first real clue? For those who are convinced the road was built by people, the evidence seems to speak for itself.
The stones are massive, some are 13 feet long, and they seem to be laid out in a deliberate straight line like this. Believers argue that nature just doesn't make perfectly straight lines and neat right angles like this. They point to what look like clear signs of construction, like smaller stones that could have been used as props to keep the bigger blocks level. The main theory is that the structure was a breakwater designed to shield a settlement on the coast from the pounding ocean waves. Building something like that would have taken some serious engineering know-how to cut, move, and set these multi-ton blocks so perfectly. And that kind of skill, they say, points to a forgotten civilization, one like Atlantis, which had technology far beyond what we think ancient people were capable of. But the vast majority of scientists tell a completely different story. Geologists who've studied the Bimini Road are pretty certain it's a 100% natural formation. They call it beach rock. That's a type of rock that actually forms pretty quickly right where the tide comes in and out, as sand and shells get glued together by minerals.
The scientific explanation goes like this. A huge, solid slab of this beach rock formed along what used to be the coastline. Then, as sea levels rose, the sand underneath washed away. The slab sank, and the pressure caused it to crack along its natural fault lines. This process, called jointing, can create shockingly straight lines and perfect-looking blocks, easily tricking us into thinking we're seeing a man-made wall. And it's not unique. Similar formations have been found in other places around the globe. Plus, after countless studies of the site, there are no ancient tool marks, no carvings, and no artifacts to hint that humans were ever involved. But maybe the biggest nail in the coffin for the Atlantis theory is the age. Carbon dating shows the rocks themselves only formed between 2,000 and 4,000 years ago. That's thousands of years too late to be part of Plato's Atlantis, which supposedly disappeared about 12,000 years ago. The Bimini Road leaves us caught between what we see and what science tells us. On one side, you have something that looks so clearly man-made and a prophecy that seemed to come true against all odds. It's an incredible clue that suggests there are lost parts of our history we haven't found yet. On the other side, you have a solid scientific explanation backed by carbon dating and geological analysis that says it's all natural. There are no ancient tools, no artifacts, and a timeline that just doesn't fit the legend of Atlantis. So is the Bimini Road a real path to a forgotten empire? Or is it just a beautiful illusion created by nothing more than sand, sea, and time? The mystery is a powerful reminder that there are still so many secrets hidden in the depths of our own world.